All right, so we're talking about self-knowledge, and basically this is the idea of how we know ourselves. And we said that the first way that we know ourselves is through kind of this reflection idea. So that's self-awareness, and what we're reflecting on is behaviors or thoughts that we have or have done, and we compare that to some standard. All right, so that's self-awareness theory. And the second place we know ourselves from is we know ourselves through our behaviors. Now, this is called self-perception theory. And what we do is it kind of works backwards than what you would think. So what's happening here is that we are going to gauge our attitudes based on our own behavior. All right. So this may seem backwards. All right. Usually what happens is you have an attitude like I love chocolate, and then you go eat that chocolate. This would say that we eat chocolate and then we're just like, oh, hey, I must really like it. So it goes backwards than what you would traditionally think of. But it actually makes a lot of sense. So what self-perception theory said, according to Bem, is that what we have is this idea that we behave a certain way. Okay, so let's say we are at a sporting event. Let's say we're at a basketball game, and all of a sudden, and you're at a basketball game, and all of a sudden you start cheering and jumping up and down and screaming, "Yay, go team!" and all those things. When the basketball game's all over and you had a really good time and you were cheering the loudest, you would say to yourself, I must really like basketball. Now, this happens to us more frequently than we know. How many of us would sit down with like a bag of Doritos or a package of Oreo cookies or whatever, and you start eating them, and the next thing you know, you look down, you're just like, wow, I just ate a whole bag of Oreos, or I just ate a whole bag of Doritos. Huh, I must have been real hungry. And that's what self-perception theory would say. So the way it works is in this particular instance is you do something and that informs your behavior, and that's how you know yourself. Okay? Now the rule of this, there's a big rule, and I'm gonna put it all in caps so we can all see it. At the attitude, it only works when the initial attitude is ambiguous. All right. So let me give you, this is actually rule number one and the most important rule. There's actually going to be two rules. I'll get to the second one in a second. So this first rule is when the attitudes have to be ambiguous. So what that means is if you really love basketball, and then you go to a game and you cheer and you're the loudest person ever, and afterwards you say, I must really love basketball, well, no duh, your attitude was already there. All right? A good example of this is me. So, for example, I do not like going to I don't like going to the dentist. I do it, but I don't like going. All right. So I already don't like going. I end up going to the dentist. They clean my teeth. They do my thing. Afterwards, I'm not like, man, I really don't like this place. It's like I already didn't like it to begin with. All right. So your attitude must be ambiguous. The thing you're doing, you must be like, you don't have an opinion one way or another. All right. So this is the idea. Let's say in the last election, if let's say you didn't like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, you didn't like Trump or Clinton, you go to the election polls. All right. So you don't have one way or another. You could care less about either one, but you know that it's you should vote. So you go vote, and all of a sudden, let's say you're there, and you're just like, whatever. You flip a coin, you cast your ballot for Trump. You turn the ballot in. When you leave, then you're more likely to say, I must like Trump. The reason is because we need to describe our behaviors. All right. So this only works when the attitude's ambiguous. That's the first. What that means, once again, is you have no strong opinion one way or another. The second rule is that it must be volitional. What that means is you have to do something of your own choice. So take me in church, for example. I do not like going to church. If my wife drags me to church, I'm not there on my own accord. All right? If she forces me to go, then this will not kick in. All right? So if I'm forced to go to church, I'm not going to leave saying, I went to church. I must really like it. No, it's because I was forced to go. All right. Now, if I went to church voluntarily and I am like, I could go either way, I leave church, I'll probably say, hey, I really liked it. All right. So you have to have those two rules going on. And when you do that, then you have this case where self-perception theory kicks in. And this is the second way that we know who we are. All right, the final way is something called social comparison theory. All right, social comparison theory here, the idea is that we know ourselves by looking at others. So we gauge our attitudes or our behaviors based on, really, it's whatever other people are doing. All right. Now, Festinger was the one who came up with this particular theory. And Festinger, what he said specifically is that we use others to learn, all right, about our own abilities. So we learn about ourselves by comparing ourselves to others. So the idea here is that what you do is you pick someone and you determine whether or not you're better off or worse than them. And what that's going to do is that's either going to make you feel good or you're going to learn. All right. So let's go through there's actually 3 types of social comparison: upward, downward, lateral. No one ever talks about lateral. Lateral is where you compare yourself to someone who's just like you. And we're not going to talk about that because that's not where the kind of juicy differences are. But what we do care about is upward or downward. So let's go with downward. So downward comparison is when we compare ourselves with people who are worse off than us. So let me give you an example. This person right here, I don't know if you know who that is. That's Master P. He's a rapper. The show that he was on is Dancing with the Stars. If you've never seen Dancing with the Stars, a celebrity like Master P is teamed up with a professional dancer, and they dance dances and get judged. And then the worst celebrity that dances gets kicked off each week. All right. So let's say, now Master P, if you watched the show at all, was a terrible dancer. Absolutely terrible. It looked like Frankenstein dancing. Like he didn't move his hips, he didn't move his knees. It just looked like, he was a Frankenstein monster dancing around. And it was not good. So let's say I'm going to compare myself to him on dancing ability. All right. Downward comparison means that if I can walk, I'm a better dancer than him. So if I'm like, hey, I want to compare my dancing abilities downward, I'm going to compare myself to Master P. And what do I get out of that is I feel great about myself. I feel good. My self-esteem goes up. So motivation here is we want to feel good. All right. So the benefits is we have a self-esteem increase. You feel good about yourself because you compare yourself to someone who's worse off than you. But it costs us something, and that is we don't learn. There's no advancement for me. So if I'm just like, I'm a better dancer than Pastor P. I'll feel good about myself, but I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to advance. I'm not going to try to hone my skills to be better because I'm already better than him. All right. So we don't learn anything. And we do this when we need self-esteem maintenance. So if this is where if you do something kind of immoral, let's say you cheat on your significant other. All right. And you feel bad about it. You feel bad about being unfaithful. And what will happen is you'll start to say things like, well, at least I didn't kill anybody. At least I'm not a murderer. And what you're doing is you're downward comparing. And by doing so, you're going to make yourself feel better. All right. So in the example I gave before where I yelled at my son for no reason, I can at least sit there and be like, well, at least I didn't beat him. And what's going to happen then is I'm going to compare myself to child abusers and be like, that's worse. So guess what? I feel better. I don't learn anything, but I feel better. All right. And then the second one is upward. So upward comparison is we compare ourselves off with people who are better. So if you don't know who these two people are, this is Brett Favre and this is Aaron Rodgers. And they were both on the Packers at the same time. He was the starting quarterback forever, and this was his backup. He's the starting quarterback now, and he's doing very, very well. What's going to happen here is in terms of upward comparison, you compare yourself off with someone who's better than what you are in terms of what you want to evaluate yourself on. So in this case, Aaron Rodgers would be kind of looking up to Brett Favre and saying, I could be better. If I were better, I would be like Brett Favre. I'm comparing myself upward. The benefit is you learn something. So now you are motivated to learn, to be better. So this way Aaron Rodgers can become the starting quarterback, for example. So you learn. Upward comparison motivates us to do better. So if I compare myself to a father in terms of parenting skills with someone who's better than me, then maybe I'll learn and try to be a better father, right? The cost is that we do feel bad, so it hurts our self-esteem, and we do this when we need to learn. All right, we do this when we need to learn. Now, when you're talking upward or downward, all right, you guys do this more often than you think. So, for example, I know when you guys are in classes together, what you'll do is you will often sit there and get out. You'll often sit there and you will you get your test back, you look at your grade, and then you'll kind of peek over to see how your neighbors did. And guess what? If you did worse, if you did better than them, you'll be like, "Hey, I feel good. I'm downward comparing." But if you did worse, then you're going to upward compare. You're going to feel bad, but maybe that motivates you to do better. Now, there are a couple rules that make this work, okay? Number one, the first rule of social comparison is that the issue, I guess you can call it that, the issue or the attitude or the behavior must be relevant to the self. Okay, it must be relevant to the self. In other words, you have to care about it. So if someone's just like, for example, something I don't care about. I don't care about my cooking ability. I know I'm an average cook. I'm not good. I'm not bad. But I could care less about it. So I'm not going to compare myself to my friends who are better or worse cooks than me, because it really doesn't matter. Just like for me in basketball skills, I could care less about basketball skills. So I'm not going to compare myself one way or another to people because I really don't care. I don't care to learn. And even if I'm better than them at basketball, it's not going to increase my self-esteem. Even if I downward compare, it's not going to matter because I don't care about basketball. But I do care about things like, let's say, like I'm a soccer coach. I want to be the best. So I will compare myself to other soccer coaches. All right. Or I pride myself on being a good father. So I'm going to compare myself to others on their fathering abilities. And then that's when these things kick in. So it has to be relevant to the self. That's why a lot of you compare your grades to your friends, because how you succeed or fail academically is very important to you. All right, the second rule is that the comparator, so the person you're comparing yourself to, let's probably spell it wrong, comparator, sure. The comparator must be close enough. Okay, so what I mean by that is you're going to compare yourself with similar people. So let's pretend I do care about basketball. All right, if my basketball skills are here, I'm not going to compare myself with Michael Jordan, who's over here. I'm not, right? This would be an upward comparison. Michael Jordan's clearly better than me. Or, let's use someone current. Let's say LeBron James. LeBron James is clearly better than me, but I'm not going to upward compare to him. Why would I? He's too far out of my reach. I'm not gonna learn anything. I'm not gonna have a shot to my self-esteem. Like, none of these things will work because LeBron James is just so far out of my league, it's not gonna matter. Conversely, on the other side, let's say basketball skills, I'm not gonna compare my basketball skills with, let's say, my 4-year-old's basketball skills. All right? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not gonna play basketball with my boy and then he tries to shoot and I reject his shot and I'm like, what? What's up? Right, that's not going to happen because that would be a downward comparison. But I'm not going to feel any better. My self-esteem isn't going to go up because he's so far below me in basketball skills. So what happens is that this is me once again. That's me. I'm going to compare myself with people who live in that quadrant. All right. Anything outside over here, guess what? It's not going to matter. They're too much better than me. Anyone down here, they're too far beneath me. And none of the processes we talked about will kick in. So these are the two rules. And this is actually going to end the chapter on the self. But let's remember what we're doing here. We're trying to figure out in this unit what the self is. And it serves several purposes. We have self presentation. We have the executives, the self-control. And then finally, self-knowledge. And self-knowledge has self-awareness theory, self-perception theory, and social comparison theory. And what you guys need to keep track of is make this like an outline and keep track of what theory goes with what and the rules that go with each. And it should be good to go. And don't forget the names. You need to know that BEM did this one, the self-perception. Festinger did social comparison. Don't worry about the name for self-awareness, and you'll be good to go.